am joined by Maggie Lynn Olson, podcaster and entrepreneur. Maggie, so good to have you here. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much. I am doing well, and I'm so excited to be here with you.
I'm excited that you are here, so let's dive into it. Can you share a little bit about your background and how you got started and what you're doing today?
I feel like it's kind of a long, winding road, as most entrepreneurs are. So my journey really starts back in 2006 when I was living in Spain. While I lived there, I took tons and tons of photos, and I called my mom one day and I said, "Mom, I'm going to be a photographer." And she said, "Okay, please finish college first. You have 3 semesters left." And I was like, "Oh, okay, that sounds like a great idea." So came home, finished school, graduated, and because it was 2007 when I graduated, I got a job in corporate, and I was able to hone in my photography skills in corporate, also my teaching and training skills while I was there. And then in 2013, I left corporate. In 2014, I purchased a yoga studio, which seemed like totally opposite ends of the spectrum. But in that time, I had started taking yoga and I started teaching yoga. So after I bought the studio, I realized I needed more teachers. So then I created a yoga teacher training. So kind of just continuing to fill those voids that were kind of showing up in my world. And I started teaching yoga teachers how to teach yoga. And the biggest gap that I saw there was that in most yoga teacher trainings, they taught nothing about business. They did not teach anything about how to bring people into your class, how to, sell out your master classes or things like that. So I did. I taught my teachers how to do that because I wanted help filling the studio. I can talk all day to people and invite them to classes, and they're going to come to my classes because I'm the one who invited them. So I started teaching my teachers to do that. And then when the pandemic happened, I decided it was time for another pivot, if you will, and I took everything online. So I was doing yoga online, and then it just got to be too much. And I thought, you know what? I love talking to people about business. I love talking to people about how to generate leads. I love teaching people how to create sales and have conversations. And that's really kind of what brought me to today, where that's what I get to do. I teach women, mostly women entrepreneurs, how to have conversations, better conversations, generate more leads and sales in less time, and really just grow their full-time business on what really ends up being part-time hours. So it's really been, quite a journey. And along there, I started a podcast, and now you can't keep me quiet.
I love that. What a beautiful path. And I love the way all those pieces connect to bring you into today. So, with regards to your business, what does that look like for you on a day to day basis right now?
So on a day-to-day basis, I typically am, I would say, in my business, working in and on my business, like 4 to 5 hours a day. But then I also support a number of other businesses. So I am the director of operations for a software company that also supports women entrepreneurs. So the name is called Satva. So it's a CRM company that really you can do everything all in one. I use it. So it was a very natural fit for me to kind of step into that role. So I help with sales and leads there. And then I also have a couple local clients. So, yes, I'm working on my coaching, my mentoring business, but I'm also in a couple other places as well. And you know what? I love it so much. And, like I have kids, we've got a full crazy little life here. And somehow it all just works.
Sounds like you definitely have a lot going on, a lot of plates spinning, and you've built something really strong in your coaching mentoring business. Throughout the course of your journey, what part of building your business really challenged and grew you as a leader?
I would say so there's a couple different things that kind of stick out to me. Um, I would say one is definitely growing the yoga studio, where I went from a solo entrepreneur to then having a team. So kind of learning how to manage people, and how to get them to do what I needed them to do, how to be a leader, really. And then also when I worked in corporate, I worked a lot with, so I, very niche, very niche topic, but we created the company I worked for makes diaper making machines. So I know a lot about how a diaper comes together. But that also really taught me how to teach effectively. So I was in charge of teaching a lot of like product and process. So I taught people this is how the things come together. This is how the diaper is made, and now we're going to do it together. So it was a lot of like, I'm going to teach you and we're going to do it together. So that really kind of helped me not bring down my teaching, but be able to adapt to whoever is in front of me and help them connect the dots for themselves.
That's so interesting. And in those teaching moments, and in that teaching journey, has your definition of leadership changed? And if so, how has it changed?
I would say yes, it definitely has. I did not always see myself as a leader. In fact, there was quite a while where I was like, "Ooh, I don't want to be in the limelight. Please, like, please don't." It was like I will create the PowerPoint like at my corporate job. I'll create the PowerPoints. I'll be the one doing the behind the scenes, but please don't put me up in front. And then when I stepped up there, I realized, oh, the people who are here want to listen and they're actively taking part, and they don't care if I stumble over my words. They don't care if there's, like a misspelling in the PowerPoint, and like they're human too. They make mistakes. And like so it kind of took that like perfection of like being a leader and kind of brought it down to like, no, you're a person who's a few steps ahead of them. So you are the best fit to do this. And then the same thing in the yoga teaching, right? With the yoga teaching and teaching the teachers was like, well, yes, I'm a few steps ahead of you, and like, let me show you how to do these things so that you can also do them effectively. And it really kind of turned me into a leader that like wasn't on a pedestal, right? Because that's never been like my goal to be put up on that pedestal. It's like, no, I have this knowledge and I'm happy to share it with you. So all you have to do is ask.
I love the fact that your idea of leadership has, it seems to me your of leadership has changed from something that a leader is someone who is decades or years and miles apart from me to something that is just a little bit, like you said, one or two steps ahead, a few chapters ahead. And we can still be leaders with that level of experience. Or you share with your clients these days and help them shift their ideas around that?
I do. We actually work quite a bit on like what leadership means to them, whether they are, a solo entrepreneur with maybe just themselves and a VA, or whether they have a small team, right? Like for them to understand their own integrity, their own leadership qualities, that also helps them learn how to bring in clients and learn how to speak so that people listen, right? So that they're not putting themselves up on a pedestal and setting those expectations so high that it's like, well, I'm never going to reach that. So if I set it that high, I'll never reach it. And then obviously this thing won't work, right? So it's kind of a rewiring of their thought process to kind of bring them back down and say, no, I actually don't have to be miles ahead of my ideal client. I can be just a few steps ahead, a few chapters ahead, right? And most of my clients, their ideal clients, the way they want to speak to their ideal clients is really speaking to a version of themselves that's maybe last year or a couple years ago. Like, what did that version of you need to hear so that you can step into this version now?
I love that. And an extension of that is is there a personal philosophy or mindset that you try to impart with your clients?
I don't have one in particular, but I would say my own personal philosophy is definitely simplicity leads to clarity. And simplicity plus clarity is scalability, right? So kind of having those two things where what I see a lot of times in my clients or even just the people who I'm having DM conversations with, a lot of their content or their offers are kind of muddied or they're not really like super certain, super convicted about that thing and they're having a hard time. But sometimes it only takes just a little bit of shifting to bring in clarity, which then is followed by like, oh, if I do it this way instead of that way, it's much simpler. I don't have to do as much work, which then, like I said before, running a full-time business on part-time hours, well, now I can cut all my stuff in half and I'm still making that full-time salary or that money that I want, but I don't have to work as hard. And now I have time to do the things that I love, right? The hobbies, spending time with family, whatever that is. So it's really just kind of one of those like it's kind of like this light bulb moment where the people I work with are like, oh, 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 really? No, it can really be that simple.
It sounds too good to be true. Simple processes, simple way of thinking leads to a lot more clarity. I think as humans, we tend to overcomplicate a lot of things. So if we shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit more about your business, what is one of your biggest wins or proudest moments?
I would say recently one of my biggest wins would be more simplifying in my business. So, over the last year and a half, I've had a number of different things, number of different offers available to people. And I mean, this is probably like a classic, entrepreneur move where it was like, oh, I've got one thing and now I'm going to add another because I'm a little bit bored. Maybe I'll add a third and, like I'll stick with that for a while. And, over the last like 6 months, I've been like, you know what? I don't need a lot of the things that I have. So let's take things off the plate and what am I going to focus on right now? Because I don't just have my coaching business, right? Like I still teach a yoga class every week. I still take photos. Like those two businesses are still going. I still, like I have the in-person clients. I have the tech company that I support. I'm like, okay, it's time for more simplification in my own stuff, which then gave me more clarity of who I'm talking to, how I'm talking to them, what I'm talking about, right? Like, how can I be clearer and more concise? Because a confused buyer is never going to buy. So, that was something that was one of those aha moments where, again, similar to my clients, I was like, oh, oh my gosh, wow, okay, this is cool, And it was kind of that self audit of like, okay, what is actually working and what am I just kind of pushing along, hoping that it will work? Why am I doing that? So that kind of self reflection of, just basically going in and being your own business auditor to say, okay, let's look at it and how are the things performing? I think a lot of people are afraid to do that because I've had clients who are like, oh, well, I can't get rid of that offer. And I'm like, but it's not performing at all. You're not talking about it at all. Like, can we at least just put it in a parking lot so that if you want to come back to it, totally. But like, if you still have it out there and nobody's even looking at it, is it really worth it?
I think that's so key. It seems to me like a lot of people think the way to grow business is to add, and perhaps the answer is in reducing and, like you said, simplifying and clarifying so that the offers that are working well for you, you get more mileage out of them. So conversely, what would be one of your biggest learnings in building your business today?
Oh, I would say, just like having that self audit, right? Going in and auditing the things, it would basically be doing too much, right? Adding too many things just for the sake of adding them, or like, having a one-on-one program, a group program, a course, a freebie, some other little, like all these other little offerings, again, that kind of smattering of like, well, if I build a lot of things, surely someone's gonna buy that, right? Like that is something that I feel like it's one of those things where now, almost 20 years into being a business owner, it's shown up in every iteration of my business a number of different times. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I do notice now, now that I'm closer to that 20-year mark, I notice that I pick up on it sooner, which I think is great, right? So, knowing that those things are there and then having the knowledge of like, things are getting a little muddy again. We better like slow the train. Let's look at this.
I love that. What's the number one truth about business or leadership that you would like to share with new entrepreneurs?
So something that I'd love to share with them is, like the simpler, the better, right? The more clear you can be, the easier it's going to be for people to understand what you're doing. Um, and actually, a really great example of this would be when I bought the yoga studio. I took ownership, and it was like right around this time of the year. So I closed the studio for a few days, and I was like, okay, we're coming back January 1, gonna be amazing. Put a whole bunch of new classes on the schedule, put new names on them. And I was like, yes, this is gonna be so great. And like all of my regulars stopped showing up, and I was like, oh, what? What? Oh my gosh. So then I reached out to a couple of my regulars and I said, hey, where have you been? You've been coming like religiously to this class for like ever, and now you're not. And every one of them said to me, well, you have that funky name on, so like I don't know what that is. Um, and I was like, oh, so okay. So even though I say this word all of the time in class, they could not connect that. I changed the names back to like yoga level 1, yoga level 2. Everybody came back to class. So, and I was like, oh, got it. Right? So that just that simple little change, and people were like, oh, yay, my class is back. I can come back. So that simple act of like, okay, how can I make this clearer to my ideal client opened the floodgates.
That's so interesting. You think it's a little innocuous change that wouldn't have the ripple effect it did.
Right.
And again, I think it goes to your years of experience to catch that really quickly and to be able to reach out and confirm with the market that, okay, this is the problem. Let's pivot, let's
Mm-hmm.
change. Looking back, what's one piece of advice you wish you could give yourself earlier on in your entrepreneurial journey?
I think probably the piece of advice that I would give myself would be um, trust your gut. And, it's okay to trust your gut and do the thing and not let all of the noise, right? Everybody else's opinion, um, like get in the way, so to speak. So I think that I definitely, especially in my early years of like photography, I worked in corporate for the first 8 years that I owned my photography business. Um, and it was like, yep, one day I'm gonna be ready. And there were so many people who were like, you're never gonna be ready. You're never gonna make it, blah, blah, blah. Um, and then, it finally just got to the point where I was like, I can't do this. I can't work in corporate and run this business. This business is taking off. I'm betting on myself. And, for everyone who was excited for me, there were an equal, if not maybe more people who were like, you'll be back. And I mean, I'm happy to report that, you know, 14 years later, I have not been back.
It's hard to continue forward, and you said, like you said, trust in yourself, believe in yourself, especially when you do have a lot of naysayers around you. And I think for a lot of people, they tend to be related to us. They tend to be friends, colleagues. And so it is hard, it is tough. And kudos for you for putting those voices to rest and just going out and, like you said, bet on yourself.
Mhm.
So you've been in business and an entrepreneur for, like you said, going on 20 years. You've built several businesses in that time frame. What's next for you as you look forward to the next year, 2 years? What are you excited to build?
So I'm actually really excited to build a group program. So I've been working a lot one-on-one, and now I have rolled out a group mentoring program, and I'm just excited to keep just kind of like diving into my network of people. I've built a Facebook group, and just like have that community and then have the group mentoring available for people. So I'm really just excited to grow that. I mean, I have a number of other business ventures that are, I would say, simmering, kind of waiting for them to boil, if you will, where it's like, is this going to take off? Isn't this? And I'm like, trying not to put the cart before the horse to be like super excited for that. So, like as far as my stuff goes, I'm really excited to just support my community, for the next year, 5 years, 10 years.
I love that. And how would you define success at this point?
I don't know if I have like a super great definition now that I'm like thinking of this. I feel like success is, being able to lay down at night and just feel like, you know what? There was a lot of stuff that I did today, and I'm glad I showed up in the way that I showed up. And every day I really try my best to connect with at least three people, whether they are existing in my network or whether they're, people who have added me on social media, and just connect with them and say, hey, thanks for being here. I appreciate you following me. I appreciate your comments. I appreciate you, connecting and engaging with me. And just really let them know, like, hey, I see you. Like, I see your stuff. I love what you're doing. And if you have any questions, the door's always open.
I love that. That's one of my goals for this next year is to do a little bit more one-on-one daily outreach, whether it's one person or two people. And to your point, just sort of connecting and saying, "Hey, I see you. Thank you for being here," and that. I think that's a really great share. Before we wrap up, I'd like to leave our listeners with one key takeaway. What would you tell people or entrepreneurs who are navigating change today? What's one piece of advice you would give them?
So if you're navigating change, I would definitely, what I tell all of my clients when they are kind of in those like rocky waters or they're not sure which way to go, you know, I love to grab a pen and paper and just write down the options, right? So I have them instead of all the ideas floating around in my brain, right? Because I don't know if you watch Harry Potter, but sometimes I feel like my brain is like the room of requirement in Harry Potter where it's everything and nothing all at once. So if I'm just kind of thinking and stewing on these things and I'm like, oh, I don't know, what should I do? When I can write them down and just kind of see them for what they are, I can usually then discern like, okay, this is the better path, or I'm going to hedge my bets on this thing over here. And if it's some sort of change where, maybe they're leaving corporate and they're stepping into full-time entrepreneurship, like that kind of major change, I would definitely say you're going to need to understand what you're going to need to make in order to leave that job, right? Like, what do you need to bring in? What are your offers? Like, how many offers do you need to sell to get to that threshold? And, actually, I just recorded a podcast episode today as we aired this, where I was talking a little bit about, it's usually about 10% of the people you get on sales calls with they tend to convert. So if you are a high ticket coach and you need to sell one high ticket client per month, you probably need to be on about 10 sales calls per month. which that also means you need to make about 100 connections in a month in order to get people to a point where they want to hop on a sales call. And I know that 100 numbers sounds super daunting. People are like, oh my God, 100? And I oftentimes have to remind my clients, like, you don't have to do that today, right? If you reach out to 3 people per day, every day of the month, right? 3 people. I promise you, you have 10 minutes a day to reach out to 3 people. Again, just to say, hey, thanks for being here. I saw your post. I love what you were talking about. Create that little connection. That's going to go so much further than ripping through 100 DMs to say, buy my thing, right? So, I think understanding that piece, that kind of math piece of like, okay, my goal is 1 sale per month. I need 10 sales calls. That's like three-ish, 2 to 3 sales calls per week, right? So breaking it down like that makes it go, oh, that's not actually that hard, right? That seems more attainable than like, 100 conversations, 10 sales calls, not all in one day.
I think, yeah, I mean, there's so many key points there. Understanding your numbers, reverse engineering what that looks like, and then breaking that down into small daily actions to actually reach those numbers. It's so key. And I'm sure you see this a lot, that most people don't take the time to do that or truly understand what their numbers and what those metrics need to look like.
Yes. And I would say track who you're talking to. If there is nothing else that you do, nothing else that you take away from this podcast, create a Google sheet, write down the names of the people, write down the date, the name you talked to people, and where you connected. And you can always go back to that sheet because DMs get lost, right? So if you start keeping track of who you're talking to, maybe even a little notes section. Oh, I connected with Sally today. We talked about the post she had on Facebook in this group. Cool. Because now you can go back to that sheet, that Google Doc, and say, oh, I talked to Sally 2 weeks ago. I'm going to check in with her again and see what she has going on, right? So you're creating that conversation, but you're also creating a connection so people feel seen, heard, and understood.
I love that. Maggie, thank you so much for sharing your story and your nuggets of wisdom. Where can our listeners find you online?
Yeah, so they can find me at the Chaos to Clarity podcast if they listen to long form content, or you can find me on Instagram. My handle is at Maggie, Maggie, Lynn, Lynn, mentoring. Or you can find me on Facebook. You can find me at Maggie Lynn Olson.
Maggie, thank you so much for joining me on the Leadership Lab. It's been so great speaking with you today.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for spending your time with me today on the Leadership Lab podcast. My hope is that this conversation sparked a new perspective or reinforced something you already knew. Until next time, keep leading with curiosity and intention.